not guilty on murder, and that would have been the highest charge, but guilty on aggravated manslaughter, count 3, and endangering the welfare of a child, count 1. By my quick research in New Jersey, it looks like Christopher Gregor is facing 10 to 30 years in prison, where he would have had a much higher, would not have had a lower range, that 10-year, if found guilty of murder. Christopher Gregor guilty of murder and not guilty of aggravated manslaughter and not of murder, just to remind our viewers watching now. So he was facing, yeah, so let's bring in Afi in right now, joining us in. Afi, what do you make of this verdict?
The jury didn't think that he had a knowing and intent or a desire to cause the death of Corey. And it looks like they agreed that there was just a reckless indifference to this child's life. And, it's always really challenging when you're dealing with the death of a child. But I think that jurors took into account that there were several calls for abuse against this defendant. And even days before Corey's death, there was, I think, an emergency request that his mom made for custody. And I think there was even a wellness check that she requested on behalf of her son while he was in custody with Gregor. So, I think that they didn't think that he wanted him, there was an intent for death, but definitely a reckless disregard for his life and the value of his life.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It seems like there was a difference when it comes to that intent, whether it was intentional or reckless, and that's where they get the aggravated manslaughter. Katherine Lozardo, your reaction to this verdict, not guilty on murder, but guilty on aggravated manslaughter and endangering the welfare of a child.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, everyone.
I respect the jury's decision. I like what Afi said. Here in New Jersey, or there in New Jersey, aggravated manslaughter means that he committed extreme indifference to Corey's life, because of his recklessness. And that's what we see here with the child abuse. I mean, let's keep in mind that the day before Corey's death, he was with his mother, and his mother actually took him to his pediatrician because of her suspicion of abuse. And the pediatrician did not see any signs of pneumonia on Corey. And so for a 6-year-old to all of a sudden develop pneumonia to the point of dying hours later, that's very, very obviously damning evidence for the defendant, and which the jury took into consideration. Now, whether or not it's murder, the jury obviously found that he did not commit that, but reckless, aggravated manslaughter, and recklessly and extreme indifference to Corey's life, I completely agree.
Yeah, Afi, I'm looking at the potential sentences here. I would imagine that the endangering the welfare would merge with the aggravated manslaughter. So really, we're just talking about that manslaughter sentence, 10 to 30 years. If Gregor ultimately gets 10 years, where he was facing much more time, I think life in prison on that murder, would that be considered a win for the defense?
I do not like putting it in terms of win, but yes, it absolutely would be. I think that, then it would, the judge might even consider running those charges. He still has the option to run it consecutively. You could get 10 years on the aggravated manslaughter charge, and you can get whatever the maximum is on the abuse charge. So there are different things that can happen there, but 10 years would be a win, absolutely.
Yeah, and just want to make sure I'm just correcting myself here. I said that there was count 3. I thought I heard 3 counts when the judge when the jury came out with the verdict, but the aggravated manslaughter is a lesser included to the murder. There's always some debate, I guess, back and forth as to whether or not a lesser included should be added. Do you think here, Katherine, for the prosecution, it was smart for them to add that lesser included? Because ultimately, if they didn't add the aggravated manslaughter and they lost on the murder, we'd just be talking about endangering the welfare of a child, which in my calculation is just 5 to 10 years in prison. So was it a smart move by the prosecutor to add that lesser included?
I think so, and I agree that they included that because we saw how the defense put up a really good expert that said that Corey died of pneumonia, not of abuse. And there were a lot of questions as to the bruising internally, the bruising of his internal organs, as to whether that's caused by the beating. So by providing that lesser included, then the jury was able to convict him of that, as opposed to the lower charge against him. Now, I think that he won't get the lower sentencing of 10 years, where I'm sure the prosecutors are going to ask for the 30 years because of the treadmill video that they played in court, frame by frame, and a lot of people were crying when they were showing that. Some even stood up because they could not take anymore what they were seeing that this father was doing to his 6-year-old son. That will weigh heavily on his sentence.
Absolutely. And speaking of sentencing, we're being told is going to happen August 2nd at 1:30 p.m. But just a quick note as well. As I think of being convicted on the lesser included, I got to imagine the defense is going to make some kind of appeal and say it should never have been added. Because if they win that argument, by murder, by aggravated manslaughter, and their prosecution stuck with the endangerment and welfare charge, that could potentially be a big win for the defense. So we're going to pay attention to that August 2nd sentencing, but also a potential appeal that could follow. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back. But on the other side, we're going to be talking to Michelle Troconis, so don't go anywhere. We'll be here on Law and Crime.